Hello, everybody. It's the Historical Gamer, but you can call me Matt, and welcome back to the Single Malt Strategy podcast. Today, I'm joined with my trusty co-host, TortugaPower. How are you doing today, Tortuga?
I'm a little under the weather, so apologize in advance, but I'm still happy to be here and excited about this one.
Awesome. And we also have with us Wolfpack345. How are you doing today, Wolf?
Hello. Doing great.
And last but certainly not least, I don't even know what I'm referring to on the podcast anymore. Finnish Jäger, I believe. Yeah?
Yeah, that's still me.
Okay.
Yeah?
Today we're...
Despite everything, I'm still the same.
Today we're going to be talking about kind of a little bit of RTS focused, but driven by the fact that Broken Arrow has come out from Slitherine, and it's been pretty popular. So I think we're going to be talking a little bit about Broken Arrow. We'll probably be talking a little bit about the Eugen games, WARNO being the most recent as well. But just sort of this genre of real-time tactical light, I don't know. Well, we can get into it, but today's episode theme, I suppose, is Broken Arrow.
Are these tactical war game, whatever, I don't know how to call them, but they seem to actually have a real emphasis on multiplayer as well. Is that like part of their tagline? It seems to be part of Broken Arrow's tagline.
Yeah, and a lot of like competitive stuff too.
Yeah, the only one that kind of tried to break away from that mold, which was relatively recent, was Regiments.
True.
Yeah, I would say because of Regiments, I wouldn't say it's a requirement, because Regiments is certainly like a Eugen. I refer to them as Eugen-likes.
Yeah, that's fair.
Eugen obviously sort of popularized the genre, I think, in kind of the mainstream. And a lot of these games feel like they're kind of trying to take their take on that genre, if you will, because it's very unique. Like, I wouldn't call it similar at all to like Combat Mission or other like more tactical, grognardy, crunchy games. There's almost like an arcade sort of speed to it, mixed in with like the depth that they try to provide with the games. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Yeah. So before we jump into the discussion of the game, do we want to do like, what have you been playing? I guess probably just this, right?
I mean, I've been playing something different, but
yeah, let's do a quick one then.
Yeah.
The game I've been recently playing is Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. This is the latest CRPG by Owlcat Games, who did Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, and Kingmaker, if I'm remembering correctly, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. They just had a new DLC. I kind of started getting into it, and I've been playing it almost nonstop in my free time. So highly recommend it if you're into CRPGs and 40K.
Nice. I've actually been playing quite a bit of Civil War games, sort of tied with we're recording this on the 11th of July, and sort of tied in with the Steam Wargame sale or whatever that sale was. I played sort of Gettysburg The Tide Turns, which is kind of a failed turn-based, almost like map playing Gettysburg game, where it's kind of like playing on an atlas. Scourge of War, which I've played a bunch of on the channel in the past, is probably the most like detailed tactical simulation of a Civil War game. And then I did some Sid Meier's Gettysburg, a little bit of a blast to the past. So kind of went down the Civil War rabbit hole over the last few weeks and have been playing a lot of those tactical Civil War games.
I have been, right off of our Tycoon podcast, I picked up 2 Point Hospital, so I've been playing a little bit of that. And I've also been playing this Emperor of the Fading Suns. Have we talked about that on the podcast at all? I don't remember.
It sounds familiar, but I don't think we talked about it in great depth if we did.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's an enhanced version, basically a re-release from like a 1999 game, which I still consider like the sweet spot of wargaming. So, but it's good. It's a lot of fun. It's like Shadow Empire, but different, I guess, if I was to give it a very brief summary.
When you say a sweet spot of wargaming, like that era, late 90s, or?
Yeah, that era, there was so much good stuff.
Because, I mean, that matches with Sid Meier's Gettysburg also. Like, that was 98.
Yep, I would consider that as one of them. I like the Imperium Galactica stuff. Wait, no, Master of Orion, I should say, 1 and 2. Even like Civilization 2 was around then. I mean, there's a lot of good war games.
Not really a war game, but Alpha Centauri came out right around then also.
No, I mean, Civ 2 isn't either, but there was like this, I don't know, you could play it as a war game. Oh no, we're getting back in that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Move on, quick.
What's a war game?
Finn, what about you? What have you been up to?
I've been playing a game called Wingspan on Steam. It's basically like a computer game version of the board game. It's a game about birds. You play bird cards and stuff. It's kind of fun. I'm playing it multiplayer. You can also play it single player on Steam. And then I guess a couple months ago, I was pretty deep into a couple playthroughs of Crusader Kings 3. They have some DLC coming out later in the year that's doing an expansion to all of East Asia. So I was kind of re-familiarizing myself with the game mechanics because I want to definitely play, as like China, Korea, Japan. They're doing all that area. So that's going to be a ton of fun.
I did not realize that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's like a October, November thing. Well, the four of us should try to play that.
Absolutely.
Well, today's topic, as we've already alluded to, recently a game called Broken Arrow came out. It is developed, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation, but it's developed by a company called Steel Balalaika, who I believe is a Russian developer, but it sounds like they've got like folks kind of all over too.
Yeah, they're primarily Russian.
And then it is published by Slitherine. So sort of the Wargame centric sort of, I wouldn't call it, they're almost like a micro publisher, but they tend to publish like smaller in terms of audience wise, more groggy war games. It seems like this game is done really well by Slitherine standards. I mean, really by anyone's standards, but by Slitherine standards for sure. Over 14,000 reviews on Steam. I just realized the reviews are mixed, which is interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's caveat success. I mean, it's got a lot of sales for sure. I think that Slytherine's got their money worth out of this, but I don't think the reception of the game has been entirely positive. There's definitely, I mean, I'm pretty positive on it, as we'll see throughout the podcast, but there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that you can nitpick at this game. It's got a lot of quality of life it needs.
Before we jump into that, does anyone want to take the stab on like what is, I know we sort of hinted like Eugen-like, but like what is Broken Arrow?
It's Eugen-like, I guess, but modern era.
So I guess let's qualify what is Eugen-like for someone who doesn't know.
Real-time RTS.
So usually you got your deck builder of either your different factions. When you play the map, you have different points that you're trying to compete over. You have some sort of like unit replenishment system, that's either like phases or like a ticking clock that gives you points per minute. All like the Eugen games have stuff like that, from Steel Division to Wargame to WARNO, and then Broken Arrow has a similar system in that. So you have those kind of things that are across the RTS field with this genre of game.
And it has both a single player and a multiplayer ability. I think in my experience with Eugen is the hardcore folks who play Eugen games a lot tend to skew toward the multiplayer and perhaps even competitive side of things. Is that true of Broken Arrow as well, or?
I would think so. And I think a lot of the negative reviews are coming from, I think partially that multiplayer crowd.
I mean, I don't know the devs' logic here, but I think, you have a game, an RTS game, they want to kind of emulate that multiplayer kind of competitive scene. There's a ton of games that are like, we have to promote being competitive scene, right? And I think that Broken Arrow is kind of, I don't know if they want to say copying, but they're going along that trend that you see with games across the genre, but that's including WARNO, Wargame, Red Dragon.
Absolutely agreed.
It's interesting, and it doesn't shock me if they're having some growing pains with managing like competitive multiplayer, because I think that's an often under-discussed complex thing to do, like when it comes to matchmaking and everything that goes with that kind of a scene, that I don't think is as easy as maybe you would think in first glance, although I'm certainly not a programmer, so I'm not going to try to speak to the details of everything you need to solve for that.
Well, everyone's going to try to like cheese, or they're going to try to find some sort of meta. I think back to like, Wargame Red Dragon, I think, with like the helicopter spam and things like that. People just trying so many different things to get like that competitive edge. And some of it, I'm sure, is people who are like, they're so obsessed with their win rate and their KD, etc. But, some people I think also just want to experiment. And if you're creating a game that both has single player and multiplayer, then you're going to be spending so much time balancing multiplayer, because you have hundreds of thousands of people potentially, right, playing your multiplayer game and trying to find so many different ways to win, that you're going to be spending a whole lot of your, I guess, like post-release dev time fixing what the community is kind of like creating and cheesing.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of where, part of the problem comes in with these games for me is they're balanced to, adjust for that meta. And then it makes the games inherently not realistic, I suppose. These aren't very realistic games. I guess is something we should also mention.
Well,
Oh, okay.
Actually,
I mean, I would say it from this perspective, they at least give you an armory of a lot of realistic units. I mean, things that are really out there. Oh, okay. I mean, there are some things which are not realistic as well. You can definitely debate about whether or not the stats for these units are correct. You know, I mean, I think actually one of the things I enjoy is when I succeed in the game, I realize I'm doing it in a way which is kind of mirroring the way success happens in real combat, right? Like when you can pin a unit, flank them, stuff like this. When I feel like I'm doing realistic strategies, it gives me at least the illusion that the game is doing something realistic.
I don't know, man. I don't see any T-72's turrets jumping off the screen, so.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt your whole thought. That was meant to be a short little quip. Oh, shoot. I guess I derailed it.
I do get what you're saying, but I do think games like this tend to, like the meta chasing, for example. You build your deck where, you know, everything has APS or whatnot, and infantry seems kind of useless in this game, so why would I take infantry? I understand what you're saying. Like, you use combined arms tactics in the game to successfully capture an objective, and the games do that, but...
Yeah, I was going to say, I think where these games fall is they want to appear, and this goes for the whole genre.
Whoa, geez, what is that fucking... Were you in Chicago? What was that?
That was right outside my window.
Was that a fucking gunshot?
It was a firework.
Okay. Or kind of like a child scream.
You hear the thing where do you hear the cars?
Yes, I heard the sirens and I heard a gunshot. I was like, oh my God.
My window started to light up from the actual firework going up, and I'm like, what the fuck?
So back realism. So I think, you know, the interesting thing in these games, and this goes for the whole genre, is they want to sell you on the notion of it being realistic. You've got all these real unit types. You've got all this equipment that looks cool, looks visually engaging. You know, that's one of the things I think is worth calling out with these games is you rarely have the time to stop and look, but they do generally look really good when you do take a moment to like look at your units and whatnot. But they want you to feel and think that things are realistic, but it's a veneer. It's a thin veneer of realism where, you know, at the end of the day, everything is subservient to balance within the game. It's not based on, is the M1A2 really this good relative to the T90? Is the T90 this good relative to the Bradley or whatever? It's really whatever serves the game. I would agree, there are moments where it's like, it feels like I'm doing realistic things. I think one of the things I noticed was, and I don't think a lot of players were doing this, at least early on, is you've got actual SED packages or aircraft with, you know, anti-radiation missiles. And so if you're playing on a map, I mean, this is modern warfare, you're going to be dealing with a lot of SAMs. And if you're trying to use your aircraft without suppressing those SAMs, your aircraft are going to get blown out of the sky at a very high rate. So it behooves you to have someone in your, and we can talk about sort of the way that co-op works, but it behooves you to have either in your deck or someone on your map's deck, some, you know, aircraft with the ability to destroy enemy SAMs, so you can try and open up the skies a bit for your ground attack packages. And in that sense, like conceptually, it's realistic. Like real tactics are, you know, useful in that sense. But what I think where the game sort of falls off for me a bit on the realism side of things is like, I don't get the sense that any of these units' performance or, you know, even the way that you're using these units is you're trying to tell the audience that this is a realistic looking and feeling game. But at the end of the day, everything about performance, everything about tactics is subservient to what is the right balance for this as sort of a multiplayer game. At least that's the way most of these games pan out.
I mean, sure. At the end of the day, it's about balance.
So I would never call this like a tactical combat simulator. It is not realistic in the way that like combat mission.
But let's hear what Wolf had to say, because he had an opinion about this. I kind of expressed the pro realism standpoint. Let's see what Wolf has to say on the opposite side.
I kind of do agree with what THG is really getting at. I mean, I don't know why I don't think Broken Arrow is necessarily realistic. And maybe it is because
it's an arcade game.
And maybe it is because of the balance. It's like seeing T-14 armadas
Yeah.
Rolling up in mass. It's like, okay, I don't know. It just kind of takes me out of it. All of the T90s have APS. All the Abrams have APS, like active protection systems.
It's also a pacing thing for what it's worth. Like, these games are play at an incredibly high tempo that is probably not realistic.
They're really fast paced. It is, you have to stay on top of everything. You don't get a moment. What do I know? But there's no moments to really breathe or set up.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit different than the realism thing, but I do agree. Okay, so I agree with all the points you guys are making about realism.
I don't want to go too far into this, Tortuga, but I don't know if I'd agree with that, because I do think when a game becomes a click fest, that takes away from the realism that it's trying to sort of sell itself as a military simulator.
Well, what I mean is, if you're going to command an army, what actually happens is you give an order, and then a lot of people do something. But in this game, you're the one doing all those things, so it has to be a click fest because you're controlling every unit.
Yeah.
But from the realism standpoint, like, I agree with what you guys are saying, that everything in the game has to be subservient to balance. I agree with that, and I think that that's the limit of realism for a game that needs to be competitive in multiplayer. Unless you sacrifice that, or if you're willing to, like, I don't know, probably even insult the Russians if you were to revamp them so they don't have T-14s, because we've already seen. Like, what are those, right?
I agree. It is a multiplayer game issue. Like, I think of War Thunder when I think of this stuff. And it's like, you have, tigers going up against leopard ones, for example, just to fit in this arbitrary balance bracket.
What are you talking about, Wolf? War Thunder has a simulation mode.
Yeah, okay. And I guess in that mode, I think you do play as the historical tanks and the historical theaters. Someone will correct me about it.
I don't know. It's
talking about War Thunder,
but the idea is, you're nailing the idea. That's the point, right?
Yeah.
Is that these games are all making sacrifices to have a game which is balanced for multiplayer.
A competitive multiplayer environment. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, my perspective on realism was just that it makes me feel kind of realistic. When I'm watching the two armies collide and I'm watching the maneuvers I'm doing, I like it from that perspective as being realistic. But no, I don't think that the actual stats for these, we've seen a lot of complaints about that on the forums and on the Steam reviews. So I'm sure that those are not balanced.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's like, we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. When you have a game that's set in the present and potentially slightly in the future, you have all these vehicles that you have no real data for, so you're making it up. So then you're balancing with, what someone's might think, or what open source data is, which is a lot of the times incorrect, especially with some of the Russian equipment. And then I guess I didn't want to say, like, we have Russian devs, so they're making Russian equipment, like, slightly better or something than what we see fighting in Ukraine, or, the T-14, which is, potentially not even like a functional military vehicle and stuff like that. So when you have like this fog of war of technology, you can balance in a way that's not realistic.
Well, and to be fair, there are Western units in the game as well that are not, like, what was it? Is it the M10 Booker or whatever?
The M10 Booker's in there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was canceled, right? So,
but the M10 in the game is garbage, so it's not like they made some super unit out of it.
Yeah, it's like the T-14 is actually, cream of it's top tier, and it doesn't really, there's maybe 14 of them.
I mean, that's the same as, like, the Su-57 or whatever. There's, like 10 of them in the real world?
I think they're actually, yeah.
Maybe there's more.
It didn't even need to happen with the M10, too. Like, they could have had plenty of realistic tanks to fill that role. I'm not even sure why it's in the game, but...
Yeah, I mean, this game does have a lot of hypothetical, or, it may be in 10 years.
Probably can jump all over on this, but I played a lot of the campaign, and the campaign is kind of... They do have you bring in, like, future units. I'm not even sure they're available in the multiplayer stuff, but you get access to some really advanced infantry that have, like, probably fictional, the AT-4, there's like a future version of that has a range of like 800 meters, and that's like not at all true. Anyway, so you get access to, like, advanced units that don't exist in real life yet, but they're just like future projections.
If it's not obvious from the way we're talking, one of the unique pieces of Broken Arrow is that it is a modern day one of these, whereas, like, typically Eugen is played in the near past, where they're looking at, like, Cold War or World War II stuff. Regiments was Cold War also, I believe.
Right.
And then Broken Arrow's sort of like, hey, this is like modern day. Like there's drones even, although not, I don't think they've got quadcopters, but you know, you're talking like 2020s in terms of time frame. So
Was Red Dragon like set in the 2000s?
I thought Red Dragon was Cold War in Asia.
Yeah, I would say it was more in the 80s.
See,
It seemed like it spanned a few decades, not just a specific point in time. I get the impression that Broken Arrow is actually focusing on like a specific point in time, probably around 2022 when they were first developing the game. I know it started developing in 2021, and that's key, I think, only because they started development before Russia invaded Ukraine again.
Yeah, this game's been in the press for quite a while. I mean, there's been a big marketing cycle for this game. When was it announced even? I got that one trailer, it had a lot of hype behind. I think because it was a modern day Eugen-esque game.
So is this the only one of the games that has nukes? Like, I don't think Eugen has nukes.
Yeah, and it has nukes. That's something that's kind of unique about it, I suppose, too.
Broken Arrow was announced in 2019
Yeah, so it's been a while, huh?
as part of a crowdfunding.
Wow, 2019. Okay, so I was off by a couple years. Sorry about that.
During a crowdfunding campaign on the Russian crowdfunding platform Boomstarter. That's a name. But yeah, I mean, it's been, you know, in the hopper for a bit.
Okay, so let me go back to one thing we were mentioning before, if you don't mind. We talked about the pace, the like really frenzied pace you have to play this game. This is one thing I'd like to compare with WARNO and the Wargame series. In those games, you have a replay system, so to a degree, it's okay if you aren't paying attention. You know, you set off, like in this game, Broken Arrow, you can like drop a nuke, which is obviously a moment that you don't want to miss. But in like the Wargame series, you could send up your bombing run or whatever it was, and know that it's going to do its job, and you don't really need to see the effect because that's just aesthetics, right? It's just visual glorification, satisfying, but it doesn't advance your strategy to watch something like that. In Wargame, you'd be like, okay, I can just watch it in the replay. Well, Broken Arrow doesn't have a replay system, so I really feel like this game, and it's very difficult too. I think that we've all played together some co-op versus AI, and it really pushes you. You can't really sit back on your heels. I mean, on some of the Wargame co-op versus AI games I've played, you can set the game settings low enough that it's easy enough you can actually watch stuff. You know, you can actually smell the roses while you're playing. But I don't get that impression in Broken Arrow. Things are always pretty frantic, and I never have time to like watch what I want to watch because I always have to be planning out where my next, supply points are going to be or advancing new troops. So that's one thing I would say is that if Broken Arrow wants to be a game like the Wargame series, especially because I think it plays really well into any multiplayer competitive scene, it's really important to have a replay, and they don't have that right now. It's kind of a questionable thing. Why did they even launch without that? I'm not sure. Maybe they just don't have the development resources and they need the money now, but yeah. What are your thoughts, Wolf?
I have seen a lot of complaints about the lack of replay for multiple reasons. A lot of the reasons you listed before, but this game does seem to have an issue with hackers, and that is one of the reasons the game is sitting at mixed on Steam right now. There's been a slew of hackers coming in and kind of ruined a lot of people's experience. And with a replay system, players are able to verify, oh, this dude was hacking, and send a proper proper report in. But that functionality is not in the game. Just to touch on pacing real fast, I have issues with pacing in pretty much all of these games. I do think I like Broken Arrow's pacing the best, especially when it comes to armor. Armor feels really good in the game, but some things like infantry is incredibly squishy. And I know infantry is squishy, but whenever your infantry's in a building, you have 20 guys and one BMP just lights the building up and kills all of them. That's like a skyscraper. I'm just like, okay, come on. So it's like some things I can take my time with, like armor and plan, and then I look away for a couple of minutes, and my infantry I had in a building is just annihilated by one small unit. These games are really fast-paced, so I have issues with pacing in it. But
I have the same problem actually with my armor, so I guess, yeah. I mean, I have my armor, like I look away, and I look back, and I see the ATGM going at them. I'm like, oh crap, and then they're bye-bye. So, I mean, with infantry, sometimes because they have a number of units in the squad, unless you get like a really high area effect, like a big bomb, a nuke will do it, but even like ATACMs or anything like that, they usually don't eliminate the whole squad, so you have a small amount of time. Like when that BMP is shooting at the building, there's usually a small amount of time where you can like right-click them out of the building, although they do take like 5 seconds to get out, so they might be dead before that happens. But I mean, all I'm trying to say is I think it's a problem for all my units. My airplanes die fast, my vehicles die fast, and my infantry dies fast, like you said. So yeah, the pacing is really tough. I mean, it's not a game you're allowed to really enjoy while you're playing it.
Yeah, and it's like these games have beautiful, I mean, we've talked about this. These games have beautiful graphics. They all look good. And it's just like, you'd never have time to sit back and smell the flowers. You're just always clicking. You're always zoomed out. If you're not zoomed out, you're a fool, you know? I mean, you put yourself at a big disadvantage for, you know, admiring the graphics.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the campaign, Tortuga? Because I know you mentioned playing it. I was curious what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, before I do, has anybody else played it?
I have.
I started it. I did the tutorial.
Okay. Yeah, I've gotten maybe 8 or 9 missions deep, probably 7 missions or 8 missions into the US and 2 missions into the Russian one. It's very difficult. It's kind of has a similar like feel to how we've all played co-op versus AI, and I think we found it challenging. I'll let us talk about that after this, but for the single player campaign, there's also another big feature which is missing, and I think this has been widely reported on actually the developers even acknowledged this in their first like release plan. What are we going to do next for the big patch? They talked about how there's no save game feature for single player, and the missions are so long. They're at least an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. So what that means is either you play for 2 hours straight. This game, by the way, it's beautiful, as Wolf was mentioning. To me, it's my favorite like visual game of this style. I think it has, I just, everything about it to me is spot on as far as the graphics go. It's very enjoyable, very easy on the eyes, but it pays the price for that in terms of resource, your computer resource usage. So I don't really want to like AFK for like 4 hours while I go, do something I have to do while my GPU is running at 100% at home. Like, I don't know. It's kind of a frustrating thing. Okay, so let me just put that point aside and just say the campaign is very difficult, but I found it really engaging. I found myself like I have very limited time, and I find myself like every night I'm like, I'm going to get another mission into the campaign. So a game like that, which draws me back and like really, I'm really excited to play the next mission, despite how difficult it is. I would say it's a really good campaign. So I can actually recommend it if you're able to finagle around the point that you can't save the game, that even if you lose a mission, you got to restart, and it's kind of a pain. But I still think despite all that, it's worth it, which means it's really worth it, right? And if they ever were to get a save game feature, that would be even better. That's my initial thoughts. I actually thought you were talking about the voice acting earlier. I think it's actually relatively well polished, like surprisingly well. And maybe this is just because the foil for it is Wargame, which never really invested in its single player ever since like the opening one. I think European Escalation, was that the first Wargame?
I don't know if I would agree with that in terms of like they've got so one thing I like about WARNO, it kind of started with Steel Division 2, where they said like, we're going to do this grand sort of dynamic campaign. And it wasn't terribly compelling in Steel Division 2, I think, because of the setting. It wasn't, Bagration is not, Operation Bagration in the Eastern Front in World War II is not the most balanced campaign. So from a gameplay point of view, it was not maybe the most interesting when you have a myriad of police battalions going up against armored regiments and stuff like that. But I think one of the things I really liked about WARNO's sort of dynamic campaign is they give you this big map, this like general mode or whatever. They give you this big map with all these units on it, and you have to fight across a segment of Germany or whatever. And, as the Soviets are trying to break out or as the Allies are trying to hold them or counterattack or whatever. Like, I think that element of the campaign is really interesting. I don't know that it holds up, but I rarely play it long enough to have it break down. But being able to like rush regiments to different spots on the map, and then for those units to fight against other units, and then the casualties carry over so that now they're weaker next time they fight. To me, that I play that, and I in the internal monologue in me is like, I'm playing Red Storm Rising, almost like the game, right? Like you kind of see in your head visions of some of those scenes in that book. The Broken Arrow campaign, I believe, is strictly linear. Like they sort of a bifurcated campaign where they've got like a US campaign and then a Russian campaign, but it's kind of told from the same like menu system, which is a little weird. It's almost like you're playing both sides of the story at the same time.
That's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, I'm not, when I say weird, it's just, I guess what I mean is different.
But what you means by that is just that the mission select is a map. You click on like the little points are the different places in Europe where you're going to fight that battle. And both the Russian and the American campaigns have their points, which expand and open as you beat the previous missions. They're both popping up on the same map.
Exactly.
It's played sequentially for the Russians, and it's played sequentially for the Americans. but you can see both at the same time.
Are all the missions taking place at around the same time?
Yes.
Like the American and the Russian mission?
Yeah, you can tell it's in phases, right? Like you can tell that these 2 missions for the Americans, like the 2 tutorials, correspond to the 2 tutorials for the Russians. And then after that happens, both advance, and you see that the Americans are doing something which is countering what the Russians are doing at the same time. So yeah, it's pretty cool like that.
It almost reminds me a little bit of how the menu system works on, it's not, you don't play both sides, but in Unity of Command 2, you have these like chunks of the campaign that open up, and you might be able to play like a battle in the north or a battle in the south, but like then you can't go beyond like 1 or 2 missions down that timeline until you move to the next phase of the campaign, which is kind of, I think, feels similar to this. I think the thing that turned me off the most, maybe, I'm not saying the voice acting was bad, but the voice characters, like the characters in the campaign are so...
Oh, okay.
The American general is just...
Yeah, he's cringe.
He acts like he's Arlie Army, and he's like supposed to be a general overseeing a multinational force. He's kind of comical in his characterization. Or the Russians, like there's a Russian sort of female character, and there's like her superior, and it's just like this very stereotypically obnoxious, creepy old man, slick young woman, and like almost straight out of like half a Cold War fiction that just kind of turned me off from just the writing of who you're supposed to be interacting with, and sort of the briefings and everything like that just was, I think, comically bad. The missions were interesting. The actual gameplay was fine, I think. Hard, but fine. I only am like 4 missions in, so I won't pretend to know like all the detail of it. But I think that was just something that kind of made me kind of cringe a few times as I was trying to make my way through. Because also like there's really long briefings and cutscenes between all this too, that maybe too long, between missions. And then also just the lack of the save game mid-battle, because the battles get progressively larger and more complex. Even the tutorial, to not have like the ability to save in the middle of it is kind of, it's a long time to commit to something that you don't necessarily want to play in one sitting. Although at least in the tutorial, I think you can skip ahead if you want to the end of the missions.
I want to say that I think that the difference between Broken Arrow and the Wargame series is exactly kind of what you were saying, this linear structure. It's very narrative driven. I played the WARNO version, the grand campaign stuff. I also played the Wargame Red Dragon one, and it was not satisfying. I felt like it was just like a little snippet of what you would do in a normal battle. It was kind of very samey, but objective based and narrative driven missions in Broken Arrow. Look at it. I mean, I'm not saying I should speak for everyone. I found that the repetitive nature of WARNO, I found WARNO to have a repetitive nature, and I find this one to be much more interesting, especially when you have objectives like, okay, there's one mission where you go and capture an HQ where the Green Berets are there, and they're actually looking for this Russian governor guy. And then you hold that while they're actually going through a tunnel system, and then they appear in different other places on the map, and then you have to go and like rescue them. And that's like, to me, that's really cool, because I mean I can buy into that like gameplay. I can buy into that narrative. But the WARNO version was just like, here, take your troops and fight a normal fight over here. And then, oh, by the way, go and take whatever troops you want and fight on this one. And all it did was basically restrict the units you had to fight a normal map. And that was not interesting to me.
I think the WARNO campaign, you are kind of telling your own story based on what's happening on the bigger map. And in that sense, it's sort of make your own fun. I think Broken Arrow, to your point, is more well scripted. So there's maybe more interesting stories to tell from what is the game explicitly telling you. Although I do wonder about replayability there, because you're not going to get a new story. Where in WARNO, the map can unfold differently on the grand map, and sort of you can tell a different story based on where units are pushing in the cities that battles are being fought around. Whereas like Broken Arrow is going to be the same exact story every time. It might be better, but it is going to be the same exact story every time.
Can't, because they have different, like, it's the collect them all achievements type stuff. They have different achievements, same kind of way StarCraft does, and a lot of games do. You can replay, and there's little hidden goodies like, did you find the Su-57 on the airplane map? I didn't. Actually, I did, but I didn't capture it in time. So yeah, there's little things like that. But no, I think that WARNO is boring the first time around. That's my problem with it. I did not enjoy it even the first time. I stopped after like 2 hours on the grand campaign, because it was just, I would rather play co-op versus AI and set up my map and have all my units available to me. Like I can construct my own deck. We talked about deck building. We should probably talk more about that too. But I like constructing my own deck. The grand campaign was basically, here's a small, here's 10 units you can use for this entire map. It's very, I don't know.
I don't think it was that small, but I generally
it was bad.
The broad strokes of what you're saying, yes. Although if I was a narrative, if I was Wolfpack and I was going to create a narrative story around a gameplay, I think there's more.
But you would do that with scenarios, not through the WARNO campaign.
Would you?
I mean, the WARNO campaign is very restrictive, is what I'm saying. I think it's restrictive and it's repetitive. Okay, I've already said it already, but that's my thoughts. I really don't think the WARNO campaign is compelling, okay. And I think you can't even finish one I mean, did you finish it? Did you feel compelled to keep going?
Not because it's boring, but just because I think it's more of a grind.
Grind, exactly.
I think, and that's the problem with the Steel Division stuff too, is you get into a little bit of whack-a-mole where it's now there's all these little units you're racing around trying to sort of snuff out. But anyway, broad strokes, yes, I agree with what you're saying. I might quibble on the margins, but who cares? Yeah, so that's the campaign.
Sorry, one last little thing. I just want to say, to me, the campaign right now is the highlight of the game. I really liked it.
Okay.
I know Finnish played a whole lot of the first Steel Division. How does that system compare to anything they've described or you've played since?
Steel Division 1, I think the standout feature besides obviously the World War II setting is that Steel Division 1 had the phase systems for unit replenishment. So you had phase 1, you had a limited number of points. So it was kind of set up that your first phase should be lighter units, more recon units. And then phase 2 was kind of some of the heavier units. And then phase 3 is kind of this is where your main battle tanks are coming in. This is where your Tiger tanks, your heavy tanks are moving onto the battlefield. And I don't really think any other games have replicated that. I think it was extremely unpopular because it was unpopular by the people who played Steel Division 1 and then had Wargame Red Dragon veterans. And I think they complained so much that's why it never came back, because Steel Division 2 didn't even have that. One of my knocks against Eugen is that I feel like they don't innovate because the Wargame Red Dragon community just gets pissed off. I feel like the games that we get from them are just so similar. They're so safe. They're putting out a safe product.
I don't think that's always been true of Eugen, but I definitely think that's where they're at now, where it's to keep the boat afloat, we've got to keep this core audience appeased. And to do that, we've got to keep making the same game over and over again.
They made they're on their 4th Cold War RTS game.
Yeah, but even so, think about, I don't know, did any of you play Ruse?
I tried.
Yeah.
What even is that?
It's a game by Eugen Systems way back in the day. I think it was...
But is their original, right?
I don't know. I thought maybe Wargame came out first, and then that was the sequel, but I could be wrong. But I remember that game had a very unique concept where there was this intelligence side of things where you had based on, there was almost like SIGINT that would give you information about radio chatter or information happening on the map. That was almost like this intelligence gathering within the map that played a role. I didn't play it a ton, and it's been years, so I don't want to go back into try and describe in detail how it worked. But the general concept was to uncover things you couldn't physically see. There was this almost radio chatter side of things that would kind of help reveal what your enemy was trying to do. And I think there was ways you could also feed false information. I think that's where the name Ruse comes from.
Yeah, you would drop paratroopers or whatever, and the enemy would see them on the map, but it would be fake. But they would see them as real.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool.
It was very innovative, right? that's not something, they don't do that anymore. And I think Ruse, it had a major publisher. Was it Activision or was it, I can't remember who, but it was it was on console as well. It had a 3D campaign that had animated characters talking through. It was a very high production value game for what we, this sort of genre. I think it failed. I'm guessing it failed.
No, well, that's true. I guess it did.
Because at least they didn't stay with the publisher. They don't Activision doesn't publish them anymore, and
it was one of those games that became successful after it had already gone to market and kind of like faded, but people realize its brilliance like years later. It's like one of those sleeper movies that people suddenly realize, oh, this is actually really good.
Yeah, like critically, I think it was well regarded by a lot of people who I respect.
Right.
Financially, I assume it was not a bonanza.
Exactly.
Out of curiosity, I mean, how many of those mechanics, how well do those mesh with a competitive multiplayer crowd?
But I think that was before they became captured by the competitive multiplayer crowd. You know, I think that was when they were focused on making an RTS with largely single player elements. I don't remember if there was multiplayer or not, but like I said, it was on console too. I played it on PlayStation 3 ? It's just one of those games I hear come up a lot, and I would say that was an example of someone doing a lot of really innovative things. And even like Wargame, I think when it first came out was a pretty innovative approach, and it was very, you know, successful. It built this large multiplayer community around it, and obviously a lot of people continue to try and copy it, so like they did something that resonated with people. But now I think that, you know, now they've kind of they tried to maybe break away from the Cold War a little bit with the Steel Division games, getting back to World War II. I think their general campaign mode was an attempt to innovate a bit, with that like big map of like units moving around on it and colliding. Like that was definitely different than what happened in Steel Division 1. So like that was an attempt, I think, to be a little bit different as well. Like I think they do.
Can I also mention about Steel Division 1? They had the frontline system in that, which was new, and I actually thought it played really well into the ABC phase thing that Finn was talking about, because your recon units weren't just there to scout things out, they were actually pushing the front line, and the front line is it was the way you got your points, right? It wasn't about taking specific objectives. They actually made it frontline based, right? And I think they also went back on that for Steel Division 2, or did they keep it in? I can't remember.
I think they got rid of it. I feel like I generally liked it, and I remember seeing people complaining because it's like, oh, I want to fight over points on the map, and I remember thinking like anything can be a point on the map that you have to fight over. You know, the whole map is open. I feel like when we played WARNO. I played WARNO today, and we played Broken Arrow today, and I feel like so much of the map is not being fought over.
Yeah, now it's just the little boxes that
you're fighting over a third of the map, and I felt like Steel Division opened up the full map with the frontline system. I don't know if it was perfect, but I thought it was a good step in the right direction to make a full kind of map usage. And I also think,
and it was just different too.
It is different, and I do think that, like, you think about historically. You think about World War II having a big front line and stuff like that. It felt a little bit more realistic, even though it's kind of this arcade, you know, abstracted. You have a line on the map, etc. You did kind of have a front line. And when I played Broken Arrow or WARNO and stuff like that, you do have a lot of units clumped up in a singular area, and the rest of the map is kind of ignored.
No, I was just going to say, I haven't played the games with the front lines, but I feel like with that sort of mechanic, the points that you would be fighting over, like a town or a village or whatever, would just happen organically.
Exactly.
There would be contested, you know, trench lines or whatever. That would be your point A, B, C, or D traditionally.
Yes.
But
yeah, that's what happened. But I like both systems. I think they each have their place. But you can see the counterpoint to having a generic front line was if somebody has like all these strategically important objectives and somebody else is controlling like a forest, there should be a little bit more reward. Maybe they needed to have like a not completely evenly holding this territory. That if this is part of your front lines, it's worth a little more than holding like forest. But that wasn't the case, right? If you held this empty field, it was the same as holding this city. That's where people were complaining about it.
Yeah, it could have been interesting to have a hybrid of you have the front line and conquering more territory gives you more of the points. But then you also are fighting over fixed points on the map, you know, point A, and it's in the town. But then when you're flanking, you're making a little flanking maneuver or whatever, you're capturing frontline territory. Could have been interesting.
And like, what happens if you happen to completely encircle one of those points? You know, I mean, you could have mechanics with that. I'm surprised no one's done a hybrid system now that we're talking about it. I'm sure there's issues that we haven't thought of, but...
Well, there's a big issue, right? The first and foremost is when you're conquering territory, it's revealed on the map. So there's no such thing as a sneak attack. Now, that's not entirely true. There are units like recon units that don't capture territory, or maybe you can turn it off. I don't remember exactly, but I just remember that a lot of your unit's movement was spoiled by the fact that, yes, suddenly the enemy is aware that the front line is moving in that direction. So obviously you have a unit there.
Yeah, that's true. I guess, I don't know. We don't have to get a workshop system, so
Yeah, I think where my head was just as I would push back on the notion that Eugen doesn't do innovative stuff, because I think we've talked about they've done a lot of different things. But I think where they're at this point is, I don't want to go too far into the company politics, but Eugen had a rough couple of years internally. They had labor issues.
Oh, yeah.
They had reports that they were paying developers like borderline, impoverishment wages. Like
There was a strike.
there was a strike. I think actually that's where the Broken Arrow, so like we mentioned Broken Arrow being run by a Russian company, but I think the lead like designer is actually from France, right? Like, and he was with Eugen back in the day for Broken Arrow. Like that's where am I wrong on this?
I don't know. I don't know if he's from Oregon.
I know there's a central figure from on Broken Arrow that was working with Eugen back in the day.
Yeah, there's one main French guy on the team. So it checks out.
He's like the lead designer or something like that.
That I don't know.
They had a huge number of issues, and I wonder if maybe Eugen has just fallen back on, hey, to survive as a company, we need to make games that this large multiplayer community that we have sort of crafted will buy and like. And so now we're just going to make another Cold War game that's the exact same as the mechanics we've used for years now.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what Finn was saying. It's that every time they made innovations, which are really cool and creative, everyone not everyone, but the vocal minority complained that they wanted it more like Wargame. And so the perfect example of this, the culmination of all their innovation, is WARNO, right? I mean, this is the latest game. It was their release after many years of not having a game out. And WARNO is basically take all the war games, roll them up into one entity, and that's WARNO. They basically just give it a great soundtrack, and I definitely like that soundtrack. But they basically made it like this is war game on steroids.
Yeah, they took some stuff from Steel Division, to be fair. Like the general campaign mode had not been, I don't believe, in any of the previous war games, and that is in this. So like
they did have campaigns previously, right? They had
campaigns, but not the general mode, like not that big open campaign mode.
Yeah,
fine. You think that's just a downgrade, whatever.
Maybe they should stop innovating that. True. Okay, it's true.
But anyway, so like it does seem like that they've become a bit captured by the multiplayer community, which is interesting because Regiments, which was another game like this, said we're gonna go and just do the single player focus of this game, and they did not meet with a ton of success. Regiments was published by Microprose. Then maybe they got their money back, but like they didn't, as far as I can tell based on Steam reviews. Regiments is a much smaller player base. Now maybe that's fine, but they have about 2,500 reviews on Steam for Regiments, notably very positive, but 2,500. Whereas Broken Arrow, which has gone the multiplayer route, has over 14,000 reviews and is mixed. And some of the reports I've seen suggest like they've sold hundreds of thousands of units already of Broken Arrow,
but isn't that because they pegged it as a multiplayer game? This was supposed to be the Wargame killer. I mean, that's how Slitherine was really pitching it.
Yeah. No, I'm agreeing. I'm just saying that like in terms of focus, like that clearly the focus being multiplayer seems to drive a big chunk of the sales in a way that maybe the single player doesn't.
I agree. I mean, unfortunately, that's not me, but I understand that this game is not meant to appeal for me, and the way I typically have to enjoy it is through co-op versus AI.
And that is the way I enjoy this the most too. Like I think co-op, being able to like log into a game like this and play with your friends is, it's just such a great hang out with friends and play a game together on the same side without too much stress. Like this is a great game for that.
Well, WARNO excels at that. I would not say that Broken Arrow excels at the low stress part. It's extremely stressful for me, at least.
Well, why don't you talk about that? Why don't we start talking about that a bit?
Well, let's finish. Let Finish talk about it. He just helped me defeat the enemies in our most recent skirmish, which was a ton of fun.
Well, I don't really know what to think about this. I was thinking about, because we were talking about innovation, and there's, I wanted to segue into two things I really like about Broken Arrow that I don't feel like I've seen anywhere else, and I feel like this is where they've innovated. And the first one is the unit kit customization, where you can spend more points to have add on active protection system, an upgraded engine, an upgraded gun. I don't remember seeing that anywhere else, and I think that's a cool feature when you're doing the deck building stuff. And then the second thing is kind of minor. But I did like how buildings in the game, you can have multiple units in the building. The building has kind of like a number on there. So you can have like 60 units in a factory or something in a warehouse. And you can go into like airplanes and ships and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of cool. I think back to what Wolf was talking about, how infantry and Broken Arrow is so squishy. And I agree 100%. Like you could put a ton of units in these buildings and they just kind of get wiped out really easily. Maybe having a ton of units in a building is their way to kind of like fix that problem. Should have fixed it a different way. But anyway, I do like that you can put a ton of units in a building, and I don't remember seeing that in any other game. So innovation wise, I think Broken Arrow has gone with some interesting features that I do like.
I still kind of disagree about that infantry thing, because I guess that's the way I felt at first. But then I started to realize that your infantry, I would prioritize infantry that has, anti-tank weapons, and you can have them just wait and ambush enemies. Like if you put them in the right buildings that have limited line of sight, the opposite of what you'd normally do. But you put them in kind of like choke points, little surprise ambush areas, they'll hit the tanks. And I mean, even if you lose 1 or 2 infantry, the points for those guys is like 60, 70. And the points for a tank is like 200, 300. So you can afford to lose a few infantry to take out one tank.
Yeah, it's probably a skill issue on my end. You're right.
Well, I'm just going to basically repeat what Wolf had said earlier. I think you have units in a building and a Bradley rolls up or a BMP rolls up and they all just start getting killed. Like they're all just standing at the window, like they're not, we're hanging out. Like, aren't these guys hiding or something? Like, come on, Why are you getting shot at, all getting killed? So I feel like infantry, and I don't know, you look at some real world examples right now in Ukraine, even if you say the game has been developed in 2019, and you look at some of the fighting in Ukraine in 2016 it was, these infantry units there can hold out against, pretty extreme odds. I don't feel like, like Broken Arrow, or really a lot of RTS games are accurate in that sense.
I agree.
And maybe that's balancing because of multiplayer or something like that, for all I know. I don't know why they've done it this way, but we think about realism. Some things seem real, and maybe it's the illusion of things being real that makes us have fun. But maybe when you nitpick, you see things that, why did they do it this way?
I just don't like seeing my guy, like I deploy my guys. I'm a horrible commander, clearly. And then a BMP rolls up and just slaughters 20 men in a high rise. And I'm like, oh, I feel bad now.
Well, not everyone here is THG, the butcher.
Yeah.
Sends his guys to his doom every single game. Like, I try to keep my guys alive, and I think
I usually lose no, that's not true. I always lose the most but kill the most.
maybe.
You drop the nuke.
I think Tortuga is saying, like, your units seem to die so quickly in a lot of these games, and you're constantly replenishing. And maybe that's why there's always a focus by some of these new titles about how do we have unit replenishment in a different way, because your units aren't staying on the map maybe as long, because maybe there's some sort of rock, paper, scissors system where tank is checked by aircraft is checked by Patriot system, etc., and things just constantly keep getting destroyed. Your front line is like just a constant replacement of units, even though it's, relatively staying the same on the map.
My thought on this is that the more I played, the more I respect the place where the balance is currently. Like originally I was losing troops a lot, but I mean, I put now probably with just the single player stuff. I haven't played any multiplayer, so I'm just totally inexperienced with that. And so take what I say with a grain of salt. It's only based on single player interactions against the AI.
And co-op, just to be clear.
Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah, a lot of co-op as well. But I think I've developed a lot different. First of all, I would say that this game has a very steep initial learning curve. A lot of things you need to learn. You need to learn that double tapping gets your units out of whatever thing they're loaded up in. You need to learn that infantry will sprint when you press C, and that will remove their suppressed or shocked attribute. These things are critical to, like, it's the make it or break it types, little hotkeys that you just have to know about. And just the development of all those little things that I didn't think that they were critical in WARNO. I still think that WARNO is a lot easier to get into, and I think it could be better for a more casual arcade experience. It's probably more enjoyable if you want a lower stress thing. But I find that the the more I play this game, I see how if you put like it's what I was just saying, how if you can find, you hold Alt to get where the vision is, like what is the vision from the particular point your mouse is at on the map. And you look for a building which is perfect for, like my recon unit, I want that in a building. I don't want them firing. I turn off I have them return fire only. And then I have them camp in a really good observation building versus like my AT unit. I'll put them in a building which is actually protected. It's kind of obscured by other buildings so that the tank is really close. The penetration for these things goes up with the enemy unit being closer, or if it grounds a corner and its side is exposed. I've learned how to do those things and I've seen them pay off a lot better. So I feel like I was a little bit miffed by the game at first because it was so difficult, but really struggling, and it's painfully beating my head against it. I feel like I've come to respect the system the way it is. That's not my way of trying to say get good.
No, I mean that's a really good way of saying get good. I respect that, actually.
So unfortunately, none of us here is actually good. Probably Wolf, you might be the best, or maybe Finnish, you've actually just saved my bacon in AI versus co-op. So none of us have like the high level experience. We don't know what the competitive game is like. I haven't even watched competitive games, so I'm not sure what that looks like.
I feel like when I think about WARNO and Broken Arrow, I found the WARNO AI to be a lot easier than Broken Arrow. Broken Arrow's like some of the multiplayer, the co-op games that the four of us have done. Sometimes Broken Arrow seems to have like this sixth sense. Like you guys are getting sniped by their missiles or something at the start of the game, or obviously the AI is going to be able to control all the units while you're only looking at like two. You're running into those kind of issues, and I don't know where the AI is nerfed and buffed based on these things, but I don't feel like the AI is really that difficult in either game. But I felt like WARNO's AI was easier.
I can see that. I feel like the Broken Arrow AI is kind of difficult. I mean, I put it on hard one time because I was like, we're a bunch of real human beings against an AI, and the hard AI rolled us.
Yeah, we learned real quick we're actually NPCs.
Yeah, we again, it was like our second game. We were bad. And Tortuga and Finnish were carrying pretty hard, but
I will say that the AI does surprise me, like in how aggressive the AI in Broken Arrow can be sometimes. Like you'll start a game and maybe it's cheating. Maybe it knows what road you're coming up and it's not just guessing, because you could certainly guess this. But like multiple times, depending on the deck you choose, the AI will just drop a nuke on your ingress route to the map and like take out a big chunk of your starting units. And that really caught me by surprise the first couple times. I was like, well, did they really just spend 1,000 points or whatever to do this? But oh my God, it worked. And now we're fucked for a while.
When I think about playing that game on hard AI, I just remember it was a lot of like wave tactics by the AI. I don't know if because of them being hard, they had more points, or, there's some buffs to their units in some way. But I just remember, trying to hold on to certain points, and then they just kept coming. It was like, it felt, your numbers, it felt unfair. And it didn't feel like I was getting beaten because of my skill at the game. I was being beaten because, they're sending wave tactics of tanks and infantry at me.
When we played together several times, we always played as the Americans, and we were dealing with the Russians doing that. And, stereotypical Russians are going to send wave tactics. Did you guys or Finnish, did you experience that playing as the Russians against the Americans, or have you not done that?
Did I experience that as the Russians playing against the Americans?
Like, did the Americans use the same kind of wave tactics against you? Have you experienced that?
I think to some extent, because I think that's just baked into the AI. And we've seen, they kind of clump up in areas. And I think WARNO is exceptionally bad at that. The game that I played today, the AI gets really bunched up on the points. And I don't know if that's just like an AI programming thing. And I didn't remember that happening in Broken Arrow.
Yeah. I mean, there have been a couple of times where I've dropped a nuke and been shocked at the number of skulls I saw come up. So there's definitely times where the AI will bunch up in Broken Arrow. But I think you don't always have the visibility to see it either in Broken Arrow, I think.
Yeah, I think I would say I guess they do bunch up, yeah. But I think I remember seeing it more prevalent in WARNO. But I don't know. We're probably nitpicking random crap. So
one of the things I appreciate about Broken Arrow is I think line of sight is pretty restrictive. I often have a difficult time understanding where things are, where we need to push, where there's opportunity. And I think it does do a good job of like really incentivizing you to use drones or other sort of recon vehicles to like actually see where things are on the map. If you don't do that, you are going to have a real tough time playing the game, in my opinion. And so that really does incentivize like recon type units that give you that information.
Yeah, recon's pretty fun in the game. I like using artillery in all these games, kind of figuring out where the enemy's fixed positions are and hitting them with, you know, HIMARS or whatever, Iskanders. I enjoy doing that, and maybe it's just because it's slower paced and my simple brain can handle it.
It's nice too, because in my experience using artillery, it actually survives long enough to resupply.
Maybe that's part of the reason I like it. Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I like the resupply mechanics. I like bringing in cargo with like Chinooks and stuff. Like I find that enjoyable.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a logistics player at heart, you know?
Was it expert study logistics, amateur study tactics or something?
That's right.
That's right.
The man's an expert.
That's me, famously.
famous expert.
I really like the way air is done in this game as well. It's better and much better, I would say, than how it's done in WARNO. Your AT-10 is out on the map for a really long time, making its strafing runs, and you can actually get a B-52 that sits in the back and just lobs cruise missiles stuff. It's so cool. I just feel like it's much better developed than what I saw in WARNO, and maybe that's partly just because they didn't have like cruise missiles and stuff like that. Maybe the A-10s were not as advanced back in the WARNO era. I mean, the era that it's playing as. But I just think that the air stuff is done better. And I like the Patriot missiles and then the seed that TSU was mentioning at the beginning, I think.
Agreed.
I think Broken Arrow does a better job than WARNO in incentivizing intelligent play and thoughtful play around what units am I bringing to the fight. Now, I'm not a WARNO expert, so maybe I'm speaking out of ignorance, but it felt to me, it has felt so far to me much more like, oh, okay, that makes sense. This would counter that issue that I'm having. And if I play that way, like the first time I brought Sed to a fight, I didn't do it the first few times. And then I brought it. I was like, wow, okay, so I can now use the airspace. Like this is a game changer, but I've got to make sure to do it. And suddenly like now the S-300s aren't shooting down everything of mine the minute I, approach the enemy. It's still something you got to be aware of. You got to continually cycle in Sed strikes. You've got to make sure you've got fighters to provide top cover for those A6s or whatever you're using for Sed to make sure they don't get shot down by enemy air. But like it really incentivizes intelligent play in air in a way that I kind of didn't really feel like WARNO does. And maybe again, to your point, it's just because some weapon systems are more advanced and there's more variety to air units in 2025 than there was in 1980, but it's enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you guys are saying about the air stuff, and I agree when it comes to the close air support, the helicopters, the A-10s, the frogfoots, etc. But with the cruise missiles, I don't like it. The game is still the maps are too small to have Tu-95s lobbing KH-101s at, 50 kilometers away? It's just... And that gets into the realism thing, and maybe I'm just... That platform should not be anywhere near a Patriot.
Yeah, you're right.
It shouldn't, but it's fun to see when you see an enemy cruise missile coming in, especially when it's... there's only one of those. It's coming in slow. It's that's a nuke. Oh, fuck. Like, as it's coming in.
It is cool.
Like, that's a fun experience to have.
The nukes are fun. I do like nuking. My first nuke experience was my favorite. I dropped it on where I was pretty confident the enemy was going to be, and then Steam popped up an achievement for dropping a nuke on absolutely nothing.
That's right. Was sending a message?
Yeah, exactly.
With this unit kind of stuff, WARNO, Broken Arrow does seem to have like this kind of weapon range nerf with a lot of things, except for some of the missiles. Wasn't there a game where someone was flying around with their B-52 at the back of the map just lobbing missiles? But when you think about like the range of your tanks and some of these other units and like the helicopter missiles and things, they seem they seem nerfed. They seem so short. So you have like this.
They're engaging at like just 100 meters away. It seems like a lot of this.
Yeah, you have this weird dichotomy of range distance.
I did find that it was frustrating.
I think this goes back to when we were talking about realism at the beginning of the episode and how everything is subservient to balance. I think a big part of that is just, well, we can't have these things so far off the map that you could never shoot it down. So if we make the map smaller, we compress it. Yes, you've got these strategic air assets that everybody wants to see, but they're also like, the maps are small enough that if you're not paying real close attention to where your B-52 is, you're not 180 kilometers out launching these things. You're 20 kilometers out and you're 10 seconds away from getting yourself shot down because you just wandered too close to an enemy SAM battery.
I feel like the map size is too small from the perspective that you have to micromanage. I've gotten better at this, but many times my B-52s have flown over, like right over the combat where they never would want to be if they're launching cruise missiles from far away, right? So yeah, and what you kind of a pain in the butt, you have to like right click them back and forth at the very bottom of the map, like on the mini map. That's my trick to it. And that is so, I almost wonder if it would be better if these were off map entities, because that's what they should be.
Yeah, I would prefer it. You wouldn't see it.
There we go. We solved their problem.
I mean, you can shoot down cruise missiles, so maybe that would work. But I think part of that is folks, they want the counter. They want, all right, so you've got this asset, but now it's off map and I can't kill it. So, I think that poses a different set of design challenges. But I will also agree, like in terms of map size, also these big aircraft have wide turning radiuses. So you may think you're in the back of the map and you order your guy to turn around and he may swoop halfway across the map. And you're just like, no, turn around. I don't want you going that way. And you gotta be careful with that.
I can't wait for all the comments just to say, you guys suck.
Get good.
Get good.
I had a friend who was interviewing someone at his job, and like they were asking, how they responded to certain types of challenges or whatever in the workplace, and the person's response was basically like, "Work harder." It's like, okay,
there you go.
The last thing that I think I want to talk about is another comparison, mostly about differences in with RTS games, and it's going to be Call to Arms, Gates of Hell, Ostfront.
Okay, I was thinking about this game too this whole time.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to bring it up.
I'd bring it up, I guess. So I'm just thinking, it's another RTS game, and what makes it kind of stand out from when we played it, and that's going to be, you have infantry units that can access guns and ammo, and they have like a inventory for every infantry unit, so that's unique. You don't have that. It's definitely not a big battlefield game like Broken Arrow or WARNO. It's a more tactical RTS, and that's the kind of RTS games that I like, so I have bias in favor of Call to Arms more than these other two games. But anyway, infantry with inventory makes it unique, and then the first-person viewpoints with anything, infantry, tanks, ships. In one of Wolf's recent videos, driving around in a ship, shooting things. So I think those two things make Call to Arms, Gates of Hell stand out compared to other RTS games.
Yeah, and that game does an interesting thing where there are off-screen call-ins. You have your heavy artillery in the back line, and in this case, your heavy artillery for Broken Arrow, or a game like Broken Arrow, could be cruise missiles coming in. You have aircraft call-ins that you don't really control. You're like, I want you to come in and drop a bomb here, and they do that. I don't know, the game just, it fits my style of play a lot more than really any of these modern RTSs. I say modern, I'm meaning, rifles. And it's like relatively slow paced as well. Like you can position, you can dig in. Your infantry is survivable. They're not just going to get annihilated. Once a tiger rolls up, they can fight back.
I think it's definitely tactical. The user has to be smart. They have to kind of think ahead. You got to think about your movements. And even in those games, the map is still a pretty good size. The missions that we played, the maps are pretty big, and like on some of them, the map gets bigger the longer you play the mission, because it's kind of the scripted way of things. I mean, you have all these tactical options to achieve your objectives, and I like thinking about that and doing RTSs in that way instead of this massive, you're in charge of a battalion or whatever sort of size that they've abstracted Broken Arrow and WARNO units to being at, and you're always looking from this, semi-satellite view.
When it just comes to gameplay, I feel like Gates of Hell is a lot more grounded. I've played Steel Division maybe once or twice, And I had this, it was 2 that I played. And I had the same issues with Steel Division 2 that I have with a lot of these games that I don't have with something like Call to Arms. And maybe it's just the scale. Like maybe I personally just respond better to the more tactical. You control 4 squads, a couple of vehicles, instead of, entire army groups, it feels like at times in some of these games. Because like you were saying, in Broken Arrow, you can fit like 100 dudes in a single building. I've never done that, but if you wanted to, you could just spam hundreds of infantry.
And then they can all die.
Yeah, and get mowed down pretty quick, but...
Gates of Hell, or Called Arms, whatever.
Call to Arms, Gates of Hell, Ostfront, 2, Easter Front, the whole net, etc.
Sorry. Put respect on that name. It is definitely an RTS, but Regiments, Broken Arrow, Steel Division / Wargame, like those are all obviously the Eugen games are, but like Eugen-likes, I don't know that I'd call Called Arms a Eugen-like.
No.
To me, it's more of a tactical war game. Like it very much stands on its own without reference to the Eugen games. And so I think maybe that's why, because I would agree, like I think Called Arms is especially like Ostfront is especially a great game, but I also think it's very much doing its own thing, and I think that's it's easier to sort of see how something stands out and respect it on its own terms when it's not a game designed in reference to another idea.
Wait a second, but I always kind of got the impression that game is a lot like Company of Heroes.
That's exact. I was going to say Company of Heroes too.
Men of War.
Well, so I never played Company of Heroes, to be clear. So maybe I'm speaking out of ignorance here in terms of it's
a good game, but I mean, I wouldn't call it original.
It uses the same engine as Men of War Assault Squad. So
we played Men of War 2 once.
Yeah, we did.
I don't remember that.
So I guess what we're trying to say is that there's kind of 2 different types of RTS games. You have your Eugen war game type RTS games, big battlefield, and you have your kind of Man of War, Call to Arms, Company of Heroes, small tactical war RTS game.
But I do agree that Gates of Hell, Call to Arms, I'm saying the name in the wrong order again, is a great game and is something that every time we talk about it, I think you guys, clearly it's a game I think people should, if they haven't already check out.
I've been playing it recently, actually. They had a new DLC, and I'm having a lot of fun with the unique missions, but they're looking at adding the British.
He didn't even mention in his what have you been playing lately, so can we even trust that he's been playing it, or is...
Oh, I've been playing that. I've been uploading it on my YouTube channel, so,
Which we all know because we've been watching those videos religiously.
Yeah.
I stopped watching, my checks stopped coming, so I stopped watching.
All right, well, we'll sort that out and get the pennies flowing your way. They stopped printing pennies, so I've had to stop sending them.
I don't know that I have anything else to talk about on Broken Arrow. I don't know if anybody else wants to like bring anything else up or closing thoughts.
No, the game's interesting. It's probably the most fun I've had, despite all the issues. This is what we do. We spend a lot of time ragging on games on this podcast. Maybe it's the lack of booze we've been consuming.
Speak for yourself, buddy.
Okay. But I've had a lot of fun with Broken Arrow, actually.
Heck yeah.
Overall, it's one of these Eugen-esque games that I've been, I was like, hey, this is pretty good. This is fun. I like dropping nukes. I like managing artillery. And maybe it's because I've played more of these games recently. Like I played some WARNO with you guys and stuff that I hopped into Broken Arrow and kind of knew what was what. I like deck building, which we barely even talked about.
Do you want to talk about that, actually? Let's dive into that, because there's a lot of customization, especially in the air units. Like, there's so much customization in the deck building that it kind of blew me away.
I think deck building, I mean, I'm not good at it, but I think deck building might be my favorite aspect of the game.
Agreed.
Like, I find that pretty fun. And the way they do it, like managing your little points, you can have a certain amount of points in different groups, like, armor, scouts, aircraft. I'm sure all these other games do this too, but I also like the UI quite a bit. The UI is sleek. The deck building UI is pretty clean, so
Agreed. And also we talked about bringing up what Finnish mentioned earlier, that you can really customize your units in this one. You can choose different loadouts inside of a particular unit. Previously, I think WARNO did that just by having different units for different variants, but this one has a lot more options. Like you can customize your TOE2s to be top-down attacks versus the straight attack if you just spend a few extra points. All those kind of things. Yeah, I've loved the prep. I love theory crafting. And if you're a person who loves theory crafting, you're going to love deck building. I mean, it's just that simple, because deck building is basically theory crafting. It's building your deck, and then you can go into the game and you could suck just like me, but at least you have a fun deck to play with while you do it.
Yeah, I agree on the UI especially too, because like you do a lot of these deck. In Wargame, I think I can count on one hand the number of times I actually modified my deck. But it was incredibly intuitive to just go in and be like, all right, I want my B-52 to, was it my B-52 or my B-2? Like, I want it to have a nuke. I don't want it to have a nuke. I want it to be, a carpet bomb loadout. I want it to be a cruise missile loadout. Like, it's pretty cool that especially on the aircraft side of things. Well, not even just that, like, you can change how many missile reloads your Patriot battery has. Now, all these changes can influence how many points it sort of goes against your deck for. So, you can have a Patriot 3 battery with, I think, like 16 missiles, but it costs 15% more than if you have fewer missiles, and maybe you want to have fewer missiles so you can have more batteries on the map, as opposed to, do you want to put all your eggs in one basket, all your Patriots in one item, or do you want to be able to sort of have multiple units because you save those points up, and like how that all interacts? There's a lot of customization options there that I think are very well done.
And that's probably where us not playing the competitive scene, like I think the customization is also, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because I'm sure this is what Wolf was talking about, where all the competitive scene, everyone's equipping their tanks with the protective systems, active protective systems. So, it does also lend itself to a real challenge in balancing, because basically what I'm sure everyone is doing right now is, although there are all these options, everyone's just cramming into the same options because those are considered the meta, the optimal. So good luck to them. I mean, I like that they provided us this option, but I followed StarCraft and especially StarCraft 2 for a very long time at the competitive scene, and the care Blizzard went into to tweak any little thing not to ruin the competitive balance was very intense. I mean, they really had to theory everything out. I feel like this is a game which is very raw on that aspect, and maybe that's lending itself a little bit to the poor reviews. I think maybe the hackers more so, but this is a balancing hell to give yourself this many options, because every one of those has to be balanced.
It's funny you mentioned the cheating, because I was looking at their Steam page, and like their second to most recent update is literally titled "On the Matter of Cheating in Bans." Like, okay, yeah, that's obviously an issue if they're addressing it that openly in their discussions. But yeah, I agree. I think anytime you have this amount of variability in deck building, you're going to create a real nightmare to try and balance. And probably every update they're going to do for quite a while, it's going to create a new item that's OP. I don't know that that's unique to this game. I think that's very common in competitive multiplayer games, where a new update breaks one sort of exploit and maybe another item becomes sort of the meta of what everybody picks. But I do think, it's still fun. It's fun to tinker. I don't think I'd want to play competitively against other people, though, personally. I'm a coward.
Yeah, I'll just get curb stomped. So
the other thing I wanted to bring back up, I'm not sure if we showed enough appreciation for this. Is probably going back to Wolf's point that we talk about critical aspects of the game. I guess the way I would phrase that, or I would spin that, is that we're assuming that there's a positive spin on the game to begin with going in, and then we're trying to say, hey, by the way, the game isn't as perfect as you think. But yeah, we should start probably from the aspect of saying the game is good. The call versus AI is a lot of fun. I think that despite the fact that we have some challenges with it, part of that was when we didn't realize setting up 5 AI actually meant they got 5 times the points instead of... Didn't we realize that at some point, that when you actually played against 2 AI, it was only like 2x difficulty, but if you put 5 AI, they don't seem to split the points. They all seem to get all the same points. I'm not sure if that's true, but anecdotally that seems to be true, which is just insane. So just a caution for anyone out there playing AI versus co-op. Co-op versus AI. Don't give the AI that many units because they're just going to bring in a lot more points. And another interesting thing is the AI actually aggressively nuking people at the start. That's not a strategy. First of all, I mean, I think it betrays the fact that the AI probably has a points benefit, because I don't think you start with enough points to buy a nuke at the game start. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Maybe it's the Russians.
Yeah, I don't know if the Russian.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of doubt it. I don't think that and if it is the case, I don't think it should be the case. People just nuke. Oh, I mean, I guess if it was actually the case that you spend all your points on a nuke and it doesn't hit, then I guess you're screwed. But sorry, the long story short, I'm having a lot of fun with AI, with Co-op versus AI. I'm hoping that, in fact, to play more of it, because we haven't really played that much of it. Now that I've been playing the single player campaign and like maybe getting better, even though Finnish saved me in our last game. Thanks, Finnish. I'm really enjoying it's, to me, it's like the closest thing I have. It kind of reminds me of like when Sea Power came out. It was fun to play Sea Power because you could put yourself in these like somewhat realistic scenarios in the modern era. And I like to do that same kind of thing, but obviously with land-based combat, in this game, Broken Arrow. That's all I got to say.
All right, that was beautiful.
I'm out of things to say too.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for our look at, Broken Arrow and similar games in the RTS genre. I want to thank Wolf, Finn, and Tortuga for coming on here and talking today. And until next time, this is the Historical Gamer, but you can call me Matt for the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. And we're out.